morning. I'm very pleased to be here and to share with you some of my ideas regarding the Chinese Maritime Geo-Strategy. I know the main issue which you are concerned with is the Eastern Mediterranean, but I found it very efficient or necessary to start with the principles of the Chinese Maritime Geo-Strategy, which is actually a new strategy in the last maybe 50 years, because before this, China was never a maritime country. They face the east and the north, and they prepare themselves to deal with defense problems on the land. But recently, which in Chinese timeline is a very short time, 50 years comparing to 7,000 years of history, they are very, very active. So let me share with you some of my ideas, and then we hopefully can move to the Eastern Mediterranean. China is, of course, a communist country controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and governing China today is based on few principles, but I don't want to go to the ideology. What I want to mention is three very important points. The first one, China was never a colonial country. They never had colonies, and they never had a colonial policy. There was some time in the 15th century and the Ming Dynasty when they tried to look to other places, but very fast they canceled it, and they decided to stay in their own land. Second principle, they are not spreading communist ideology, not like Russia in the old days. They have their own philosophy and they keep it in-house. And the third point, which is very important, China never went to wars to conquer. Only the main wars they fought was a defense fought in the long history. And those are 3 points which we have to remember in mind, or to keep in mind, to understand why they behave as they behave. So if I want to summarize the 4 points which I see, which are the basic principles of the ruling Communist Party, is first of all, they want to keep stability, because no stabilizing country will bring them into a risk of a revolution. Secondly, the Communist Party need to have the citizen support, which is linked very closely to keeping stability. The third point is, in China today are more than 1.45 billion people to feed. This is a huge number of people which has to eat at least 3 times a day. And the last point is the same amount of people, 1.45 billion people, they are looking for livelihood. They have to work, they have to bring money home, and they have to be happy. If you remember these points, we can understand better why they behave like they behave. Now, the South China Sea is a very important piece of water, where the third of the global trade volume, about $5 trillion, is passing there. They have a lot of oil reserves and natural gas, and 12% of the fishing in the world is done in those waters. And this is the main source of proteins to the people of China. I remember that number. The area itself is crowded with military forces, no need to go into the numbers. And the area of conflict in South China Sea is running around a group of islands, which are hardly considered as island, because if there is a high tide, most of them are disappearing under the water. And this will bring me very closely, very sharply, or very shortly, sorry, to the law of the sea, which is called UNCLOS, which defines very carefully what is the meaning of an island. And in general, the law defines that you have territorial waters, which are 12 miles offshore. Then you have another part of another 12 miles. And then from there, you have 200 miles of the EEZ, the Essential Economic Zone, which is a very popular piece of water, very large for most countries. And this is the main place where the conflicts happen. If we talk about the islands, an island, in order to get territorial water or EEZ, must be over the high tide and allow people to live there or provide capabilities for living. The main parts of South China Sea which are under conflict are those three cycles: the Paracel Island in the north, the Spratly Island in the south or in the center, and everything started in Scarborough Shoal, which belonged actually to the Philippines. We'll see it in a moment. Now, the dash line you see in the shape of a kidney is the 9 dash line. This is the name of this dash line, mentioned by the Chinese as a very historical size or spare of water, and they claim full control over this part, and the southern part of this area is more than 2,000 kilometers from China. Can you imagine why the countries around, which are in color, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, Brunei, and also Indonesia, which is down south, are against this claim of China. And it is an example of one of the group of shoals. Most of them are actually not islands because in high tide they disappear. How it is shared between the Chinese, Vietnamese, Malaysian, Taiwanese, and Philippines. A very, very complicated law issue. And one of the caricatures says that what China is doing, they are building a new Great Wall around South China Sea. This is a very small example on the common sense, which is ridiculous, of the distance from China, sorry, and the distance from the Philippines. This island, which started the whole issue, is 220 kilometers from Philippines, but more than 860 kilometers from China, and even further a longer distance, and still China claims all these islands. In 2016, or 2 years earlier, Philippines protested, put a protest or a claim to the International House of International Law Court in Hague, and after 2 years, their claim of China was completely rejected. But China just put facts in place. It reminds me always the Ottoman law in Israel in the beginning of the 20th century, where new settlements were established by the Jewish people coming from Europe. Once they put a roof on a structure, the Ottoman law did not allow to destroy it. So first of all, you put the facts and then you negotiate. And this is what they do. And they are doing it very nicely according to the Salami famous strategy, or what they call a cabbage strategy, where you pull leaf by leaf and you set the facts. This is an example of the island and shoals in South China Sea. This is how they look natural. And then China sends a very specific or sophisticated equipment to drainage the sun. They took an atoll, which was underwater, and they started to take soil or sand from the bottom of the sea and put it on the island. And this is how they build artificial islands. And today, this is the latest ship they are doing. This ship can do or build an island in a very short time. And you can see the difference. This was the island originally, and this is how it was under construction. And what came out from it is a really artificial island, which is a military base with a runway and 3 kilometers long of a runway and a harbor. And this is the island, how it looks today. And those are some systems they put on the island. You can see radar stations and weapon systems. They claim that the islands were built in order to provide protection to fisheries during the monsoon, and all the equipment is actually to save life. And you can see another island, and it's amazing. And there are actually about 7 islands which are completely finished with weapon systems, missiles, aircrafts, ships, and so on. This is the so-called to protect the fisheries. You see how the island looked before, Subi Reef, and how it looks today. Philippines was very nervous about it, so they took a very old landing ship and grounded it on one of the shoals and said, this is our country, and this is how they control how they control the island by raising a flag once a day, every morning. And in order to make good use of those islands, the Chinese started to develop a new navy. And they are doing an amazing job. And today they have 3 maritime organizations which are patrolling and so-called protecting the water. They have a Chinese Navy, which in short time, even I think already is bigger than the US Navy at all, with very modern ships, including air carriers. They have the Coast Guard, where the ships of the Coast Guard is almost the size of ships of the Navy, not like patrol boats, but very big vessels with helicopters and weapons. And they have what they call the Chinese, maritime militia, which includes a few hundred of thousands of boats. Most of them are really fishing boats, but they are manned by very well-trained personnel, and for sure they have command and control system, and most of them also have weapons. Today, the only weapons they are using is water cannons or water guns in order to send away so-called ships or boats which are entering the water without permission. What happened if you take the South China Sea at its narrow part? They managed to establish what I call a mega choke point. You know the choke points around the world. Here is a choke point, and you can see the ranges of detection systems and missiles. So anyone who wants to cross from south part, mainly the Strait of Malacca, go up to China, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea, have to pass here, unless you will take a detour. And to pass here means you are entering what the Chinese claim as their own territorial water. And this is the main issue nowadays. The main actors on all this issue are 3. Xi Jinping, the president of China. It was Duterte, which was until a few weeks ago the president of Philippines. He was replaced by the son of Marcos. And of course, Joe Biden, before him, was Donald Trump. And what are they doing? They cannot compete with China. For sure, Philippines don't do it. Donald Trump offered to his help to solve the problem, which is unsolvable. The war between China Coast Guard and the Philippines fishing boats continue. And again, every ship or aircraft trying to cross the territorial water and the airspace must follow the international law, which says that if you are going in good faith, you don't have to do anything. But if you enter into territorial water, you have to ask for permission. What the Americans are doing for the last decade or two, they develop a system called FOM, Freedom of Navigation Patrols. And they send once every few months, 1 or 2 or 10 ships, raising a very big American flag to make sure who is who, and trying to cross this, what I called again, mega choke point. And this is an example of a plotting board of one of the ships. They are crossing within the 12 miles of the artificial island, which actually is very confusing because this island is not supposed to be an island and doesn't have any territorial water, even it's now existing even in high tide. So this is what they are doing. And there is also another party in the game called ASEAN. This is Southeast Asia, 10 countries of Southeast Asia region. They are trying to find any solution, but for the last 20 years, nothing happened. China changed the attitude, or they now, instead of asking for the 9-dash line, they are claiming 4 Sha. It means 4 groups of islands which start with the word Sha. They say, okay, we don't ask anymore for the 12-dash line. We're asking for the 4 points. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. But of course, they are claiming 12 miles of territorial water and 200 miles of EEZ. Those are the 4 sites. And if we go back for a moment to international picture, you see the choke points around the world. You remember them, especially those around the Middle East and Asia. And if I want to give a better close picture for what is going is of our interest, is of course Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandeb, Straits of Hormuz, Chains of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia and Singapore, and the South China Sea, which is a mega point. Now, China, since she came to power, and remember the 4.45 billion citizens, is trying to develop its economy. And I dare to say here, I will repeat it again later, I think my humble opinion is they are not looking for hegemony. They are looking for economic advantages. And they develop what she is calling since 2012, the Belt and Road Initiative. It means they are trying to reopen or upgrade the old Silk Road from China to Europe, where Marco Polo came in and out. And they are building a maritime Silk Road from China all the way to Europe. The reason is, we'll see in a few minutes, that they are looking for the market in Europe and in Africa. So remember these blue and red lines, which are the critical issue, maybe talk later about the East Mediterranean. Strait of Malacca is a very important choke point, and one of the missions of the Chinese Navy, which is become very modern and strong, is to find a solution if someone will dare, I say dare, to block the Strait of Malacca as a choke point. If you look at another point of view, you see that the whole issue, which is now the whole area, which got a new name by the Americans and now adopted by the whole world, it is now the Indo-Pacific region. It used to be Asia-Pacific, now it's Indo-Pacific, because the Indian Ocean is playing a major part in all this strategy. America and 3 other parties, which are Australia, India, and Japan, built up some years ago an organization called the Squad. You see those 4 countries, which are supposed to give or to provide a solution to this problem of rising China. Rising China, of course, is a buzz name which everyone is using to justify the activities, which, to my humble opinion, is waste of time and money. Now, I ask myself the question, why is China working so hard, putting so much money and effort in all these activities, which are disturbing their political honesty, taking a lot of budget, and creating a lot of friction around the world? So the first answer, of course, they want to have a control on the choke points. If you have a good navy, what we call a blue navy, which can sail to large distances in the open seas, they need it and they build a navy. Remember the mega choke point. It's a part of their geo-strategy. On the land, you see they have the front with land countries, mainly India and some other, quite half a dozen or more dozen countries, but they don't have a problem with the land fight. So the border, which is the Pacific Ocean, is the main concern. And of course, the Belt and Road project. And to remind you, the 2 islands, and already you have an island which is fully equipped, so-called, or is a base, air base for the most advanced fighters. Then the whole area is heavy of traffic, very, very heavy of traffic, and they want to be involved because remember, the only way to provide what I mentioned before, food, not enough food in China, and raw materials, and send out the products in order to survive, can be done by sea. No train, no aircrafts can carry all this amount of goods. So China must have a merchant navy. Today, the merchant navy of China is the biggest in the world. Actually, the biggest is the Greek one, but the Greek is only for the flag. China is only 5,600 merchant ships, modern ships, and running around the world. There is an issue of history and culture, which is very much influencing the Chinese behavior. And China used to be an empire, and they want to go back to be an empire. They have a definition of 100 years of humanity. When the European conquered the ports of China, they want to go back, but they don't want to be colonial. They never send out ships and army to capture other lands. So this is a culture, actually this is a culture of honor. The fishing is very important for them because the main protein in China is coming out from the sea, and they are so much anxious about it that they are declaring every year 1 or 2 months of ban of fishing in order to have the productivity period unfished. But the other nations around are not supporting it, and this is the one main reason of the fight between the Chinese Coast Guard and the fisheries of other countries. And they have the South China Sea is said to be have a lot of largest oil and gas reserves, and they want to have a part of it. And to my humble opinion, it is all economic. And here you see another map of the Belt and Road project. What they are doing actually, they develop what is called port diplomacy. And now we are moving to what we are here to talk about. Eastern Mediterranean is very important to China. First of all, this is the west end of the Belt and Road initiative. So they want to be involved. Secondly, they realize that in this area, there are a lot of new resources of oil and gas. The area is heavy traffic of shipping. The oil to China today is coming mainly from the Persian Gulf, but because of the new resources detected in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially around Cyprus and also part of Israel, they want to make sure that they will be part of it and fulfill what they need. And they need energy because they don't have enough, no oil, no gas. They were also involved, you remember, in Libya a few years ago with oil activities and some other activities with Russia, we'll see in a moment. So those are the new oil fields which are concerned of China. Even China is thousands of miles away, but it looks for them as a good source, not only from the Gulf, but also from the Mediterranean. We have also in this part the activities of Turkey and Libya, which are raising new kind of problems. We have Israel and Turkey, which are also some activities. There is a refugees issue from North Africa and from Muslim countries, Syria, Iran, and Afghanistan, and the whole, of course, the shipping. And this is what they do in the last few years. They develop a port strategy. It is said that they have more than 100 ports, either owned by them or partnership, or controlled or built under or are now under construction, 100 ports in 60 other countries. Here you can see an example of the China port investment. I want to make here a note. All of the ports, except one, the one in Djibouti, which was established a few years ago as the entrance to the Red Sea, are commercial ports. Even the ports in the US, of course, San Diego and Seattle, also they have a port in Miami, are fully commercial ports. Now, to convert or to change a commercial port into a military port is not a simple story. It will take a lot of time and a lot of money, and also it will, of course, be resisted by the countries where the ports are there. So to claim today that China is developing ports for military presentation, I think it's too much. Okay, it may happen, but it will take a lot of many years, and until then, who knows will happen. So the only port which is fully militarized is the one in Djibouti. Also, the port in Pakistan is semi-military, but also not yet, and it probably will not be a military port very soon. Now, in June 2019, Israel signed an agreement with the Chinese, with SIPG from China, to lease the port of Haifa, the new port of Haifa, which is a container port, for 25 years. This raised a lot of controversy in Israel, of course, but too late. And also the Americans, I would say, are not so happy with this port. But the problem is not that the port can be used to spy on the US Navy or the Israeli Navy. The problem is that such a national asset, you don't give it in such a way as it was done a few years ago by the previous government. So this is Haifa. We are talking about the new port, which is this one. Already started to operate. It's a fully automatic port. Can have 3 ships at the same time. This port is for use of the very, very big container ships. Now, Europe continued to welcome Chinese investment in its ports, despite US concern about Beijing's global maritime ambitions. So now is a big question mark. Is it an ambition to gain hegemony or control of the sea lanes and the ports and the other countries, or not? If you take into account what I mentioned at the beginning, that China is not spreading ideology and China is not used to have colonies, I would say that this is really an economic issue, and in economic issues, there is a competition which is very healthy for the users, for the customers, not for the users, for the beneficiaries. And this is what China is doing, again, in order to provide food to which will be very soon 1.5 billion people, and to be able to ship in and out raw materials from one way and send out the goods from the other way. Another issue I would like to mention, which people are not so familiar with, is the Northern Sea Route, which because of the climate change may become open completely to go along through the North Pole from Europe to Asia, to East Asia, and the saving of distance is quite meaningful. Today, the route is 11,300 nautical miles using the Suez Canal, and when this one will be open completely, it will be almost half. And it saves a lot of time, money, of course, fuel, and so on. This is already real pictures of the trials which are done to use icebreakers to lead merchant ships during the North Pole. Very impressive. And this is a model of a Finnish or Swedish, I don't remember which one, ship, which will be itself, by itself, an icebreaker. So this is my short presentation. I will mention again that, to my humble opinion, this is all economics and not other politics, but this is a debate which must be done in higher levels, because if you see the facts involved, such as weapon systems, we have in one side the weapon for the defense industry, which in US is a very strong lobbyist for weapons. You see the owners of the countries, you see the history and so on, but facts are being built by the Chinese, and the rest is for history. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benny. Yair, do we have any questions for Benny?
No, I think it's very interesting. I know too little to really to ask intelligent questions. I question the basic thesis. I don't think that anything can be only economic, and I don't know how you compare to the build-up with the Chinese army, and now the development in the war in Ukraine. It can't be only economic. The question with the main thesis, but the facts are fascinating and very important. And I think it is a very useful presentation.
Yeah, if you mention the war between Russia and Ukraine, I would like to put to mention another note, to make a note. For years, actually 70 over years, there is debate about how to deal with Taiwan. And there was a American policy. 1972, they kicked out Taiwan from the United Nations. They recognized China after the ping-pong strategy by Kissinger and Nixon, and they built up relations, official relations with China, and so-called ignored or canceled the relation with Taiwan, but kept very good communication by, they called it trade and the culture offices. Now, and the policy was all the time by America to help Taiwan to protect itself. They sold them a huge amount of very modern weapon systems, but they never recognized or they never mentioned what will they do if China will try to conquer Taiwan and to have a reunification by force. Recently, about 3 weeks ago, President Biden, during his visit to East Asia, to China and Korea, said, he answered to a question of one of the journalists, that if China will take military actions against Taiwan, the US Army will participate or will help Taiwan to defend itself, which is a huge change of the policy which was before. Now, the White House official speakers say that no change in the policy, but this is against what the president said. Now, I think personally that either he made a mistake, which is not a surprise, or he tried to correct what he didn't do in Ukraine-Russia conflict. He didn't put US position at the beginning. And when he put it, it was too late. So he wants either to take a lift on this situation or not. It's very unclear until today. But you are absolutely right that China are building also the army, Air Force, Navy for sure, and they are repeating all the time that if there will not be a solution in negotiation, they will take it by force. This is another issue, but I don't know how much it will affect the Eastern Mediterranean.
You know, I remember the discussion for the 1960 elections between Nixon and Kennedy. And then the decisive question was the island of Koimoy. I don't know if I pronounce it the right way. Koimoy.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
you know, they were willing to go to war over this little thing there. to accept Chinese taking out Taiwan, I don't think that they ever would have allowed. And it changes the entire system. It means you give up any, if they take Taiwan, according to the picture you showed, it means that all the others, Japan, the Chinese have a long story with Japan. They have an extra grind.
You are right.
The Chinese did something to China for quite some time.
Yeah.
And though they question the security of Japan, the security of Australia, the security of the entire Asian thing, so, you know.
It is not simple.
No, it's not simple.
By the way, during the conflict in 1955, Eisenhower was the president, and he rejected the advice of his generals to use nuclear weapons on the issue of Kinmen. You are absolutely right. Kinmen is 10 kilometers from the Chinese coast.
Yeah.
Benny, you would agree that nothing is static, and that most situations, like the development of strategy, is very dynamic. What, especially in this case, what elements would you be looking for that would tell you that this economically based strategy is changing over time?
Okay. First of all, I would, as a researcher, I would rely basically on history. I mean, you don't change a history of 7,000 years with no reason. And there is no reason for China to dominate or to take the hegemony from the US. They are not trying to be, if you look at what China is doing in the last, let's say, 2 decades, they don't interfere in any conflict in the Middle East. Nothing. Even if they had a problem in Libya, even if they want very much to work in Syria, to rebuild Syria, they don't do anything. They are keeping quiet. Now, this is not because they don't have what to say. This is because they don't see it as important. As long as the port diplomacy is working and they are able to take control economically and make sure the shipping lines are open with a big navy, they don't do nothing. But if there will be signs, let's say, to change or to do any improvement to the ports they have in this region, not only the Middle East, but also in Europe, to convert it to military support bases, which can provide maintenance, can provide ammunition, can provide other services a military fleet is in need. This will be maybe a beginning of a red light. But this is not to be seen in the next, I would estimate, at least 20 years, at least. And until then, look what they did in South China Sea, which is against the whole list of rules. No one can do anything about it. No one sees a possibility, at least as far as I can estimate, that anyone, not the US Navy, and not the Quad, and not the ASEAN, can do anything to kick them out from the islands. And this is a fact. Now, to make this same story in other places of the world, I doubt.
Doesn't it depend a little bit, though, on the actions of the US? I mean, all things being equal, fine, China may stick to its economic strategy, but if for some reason there's an anti-China reaction or policies, etc., from the West, wouldn't that in some ways telescope the developments, the strategic developments?
Okay, let's see the facts. In order to analyze the situation, we need to see the facts. They have over 100 ports around the world. No one kicks them out. Even they have ports in US. They have in San Diego, they have in Seattle, and they have in Miami. This is a pure commercial investment. To change the port in Miami to a military port is impossible. How will they do it? Immediately they will be kicked out. Now, if the world is supporting the port diplomacy, which is a genius, a magnificent idea, amazing. You know, this is a Chinese thinking of long run. They are investing money, they are providing infrastructures to all those countries. They don't just take the port. They build railways, they build railways, they build highways, they build airfields. I mean, for them to take each of these 100 ports to make it military, for what?
That's not what I meant. I meant, let's say that the tension between the United States and China increases over Taiwan and over something else, etc. And we go into a phase where the West is trying to control China in some ways, or limit its growth, and so on. Wouldn't something like this, and I'm not talking about all the ports, obviously, there are many ports that will not be militarized, but other places, the choke points, for example, or other very critical strategic positions, the character may change in time, especially in a time of crisis.
I don't know. So far, I really don't have the answer. This we have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's a hypothesis. I'm just you know, seeing.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but you are trying to draw a red line when it can come to look. Let's take the situation in Israel. There was a mistake, to my opinion, by the government to allow Chinese company to have the port for 25 years. Let's say they didn't do anything. I don't know if they hide the intelligence information, intelligence systems, or they are able to do espionage on the American Navy or whatever. America complained, and there were very tough discussions with the government of Israel, but you cannot cancel the contract, which, saying this, already happened before the contract was canceled. When Israel sold to China spy aircraft, intelligence aircraft, and the US, America reject protest, Israel paid few $100 million penalty and stopped the project. So it happened before, but this was a purely military intelligence threat. Now here is the port. It is a pure commercial element. Why to cancel it? But your question is good, but I don't have a real answer.
In the end, you know, we are concerned here more about Russia than about China. I think we agree with you. How to stabilize the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean? I don't know. Our question is also to Chris. Stabilizing the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, is China an actor in this? Does China play a role, one way or the other? Do one need positively? Is she a threat? How does it work?
I would say because of its size, and I'm answering it on behalf of Benny. He should see whether I'm correct. But because of its size and because of its role in the Eastern Mediterranean, and by the way, we agreed that the Red Sea is also part of the Eastern Mediterranean system. So it's playing a big game here. I mean, a big role here. So I think, bearing in mind what Benny said, it will put its weight on the side of stability rather than instability, because it's in its economic interest to do that, until it's not. And this is it's a truism, but
the last time Chinese Navy visited the Eastern Mediterranean was in 2017, when they had an exercise with the Russian Navy. So there was a big delegation started in Indian Ocean, no, sorry, the Pacific Ocean, a common exercise, and then they had an exercise from they went to the Black Sea, came back to the Eastern Mediterranean. They can do it because the ships, the Navy is already a blue sea Navy, blue Navy. But they are keeping quiet. They are not trying to be involved in any dispute in the Eastern Mediterranean because they want to build up the commercial presence. And they are doing it. What will they do with Turkey or the conflict with Cyprus? I don't think they will interfere.
Tell me, there were some suggestions that there was a deal in the offing between China and Lebanon for the port of Beirut. Was that fact or fiction?
It was fact. They are trying to put hand on as many ports as possible in the Eastern Mediterranean. Once they succeeded so nicely with Piraeus, I heard also going to Saloniki. They have a ports in Europe, in Southern Europe, in Italy, in Israel, of course, in Egypt, in Libya. So they will try. They are trying. In Syria, they want to participate in the rebuilding of Syria. But the rebuilding of Syria is a commercial project. They want to build. They want to establish highways and buildings and new cities or whatever. They don't spread ideology. This is a very important point to remember. In order to have hegemony, you must have some anchors. You must have some points or some issues which are the structure or the skeleton of the involvement. For them, so far, it's only commercial.
But Benny, wouldn't, let's say, the rebuilding of Syria strengthen the Assad regime, and therefore it has a military aspect to it, as far as Israel is concerned, for example?
I don't see it as a real threat. I don't know, but I don't think to rebuild Syria, I think it's also interest of Israel in the long run.
Okay. I'm very grateful for this presentation. I learned a lot.
Indeed, Benny. Thank you very much.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Spread my preaching.
Yes, we will.